The market was quieting down, the sun folding itself behind the crumbling rooftops of Accra. Among the stalls draped in colorful fabrics and carved wooden artifacts, one item seemed almost out of place. A mask, dark, lacquered, and staring with hollow eyes that seemed to follow anyone who dared glance at it. Kojo, the young antique collector, ran his fingers over its surface, feeling the cold unease coil in his chest. The vendor leaned forward, his voice a dry whisper. "This mask. It doesn't like to be left alone," he said. "Take it, and you will see it move." Kojo laughed nervously. The market was full of old legends, of masks that whispered at night or brought misfortune. He had stories like that every night at his grandmother's house, yet he had never believed one. Curiosity was a stronger pull than caution. He paid the vendor and carried it home, the weight of it strange in his hands, as if the mask carried its own heartbeat. That night, the mask sat on his living room table, its eyes reflecting the lamplight like pools of darkness. Kojo couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. He told himself it was his imagination. Shadows from the lamp stretched across the walls, twisting into faces he didn't recognize. When he finally went to sleep, the mask sat silently. Or so he thought. A faint scraping sound woke him. He blinked against the dark, heart hammering. The mask was not on the table. His stomach knotted as he realized it was on the floor, angled slightly toward his bed, the eyes glinting. He rubbed his eyes, thinking he had dreamt it, but the cold dread creeping up his spine told him otherwise. Over the next few nights, the mask moved more boldly. It appeared in corners on shelves and once, terrifyingly, perched at the end of his bed, closer than he could bear. Kojo tried to tell himself it was a trick of shadows, the wind, his restless mind. But deep down, he knew something ancient and restless had been awoken. He researched the mask obsessively, combing through books and online archives. The mask, he discovered, belonged to a secret society in Ghana, used to contain the spirit of a vengeful ancestor. It was said that whoever possessed it without the proper rites would be haunted until the mask reclaimed its debt. Each night it moved closer. Each night the scraping footsteps grew louder in the silence of his apartment. Kojo attempted to lock it in a cupboard, wrap it in cloth, even bury it in the backyard. But the next morning it was always back on the living room table, eyes glinting as if smugly aware of his impotence. Friends came over, but Kojo, terrified, could not show them. They would think him insane. Sometimes, in the dead hours of the night, he would hear whispers in the local Twi language, low and coaxing, promising power, warning him of doom. One night, driven by a mixture of fear and determination, Kojo sat across from the mask, a candle flickering between them. "What do you want?" he demanded. His voice shook. Silence answered. Then suddenly the mask's mouth, carved and frozen for decades, moved. A slow, rasping voice emerged. "You hold what is mine," it said. "Return me or join me." Kojo's skin crawled. He tried to respond, but no words came. The candle flickered violently, shadows dancing wildly across the walls, and the room seemed to shrink, pressing him into a corner. A cold hand, though invisible, brushed his shoulder. The mask tilted its head, as though studying him, measuring his fear. Terrified, Kojo researched further, seeking anyone who had owned the mask before him. The records were sparse. Every previous owner had met a tragic or mysterious end. The last owner had disappeared without a trace. A note found in their apartment read, "It moves when you sleep." Kojo tried to sleep that night, but the mask sat at the foot of his bed, unmoving yet pulsating with malevolent energy. He felt a presence crawling under the sheets, around his limbs, whispering promises of death, of power, of a fate he could not escape. The darkness in the room thickened, almost suffocating. The next morning he found a note beside the mask, written in a shaky hand he didn't recognize. "Stop resisting. You cannot leave me. Panic set in. He attempted to burn the mask, but each time the flames licked it, they died before even touching it, leaving the mask unharmed. Water, crushing, acid, all failed. The mask was indestructible, sentient, relentless. Driven to desperation, Kojo sought a traditional healer, an old man reputed to communicate with spirits. The healer examined the mask with reverent fear. "You cannot destroy it," he said. "You must appease it, bind it as it was bound before, or it will consume you. Many have tried to defy it. All failed." That night, Kojo performed the ritual the healer instructed. The mask sat silently as he chanted, sprinkled sacred herbs, and offered small tokens of respect. For hours nothing happened until he felt the temperature drop. His breath fogged before him. Then, with a sound like grinding stone, the mask began to tremble, rocking on its own. Its eyes glowed not with anger but with recognition. "Enough," it whispered. "You honor the debt." Kojo collapsed, relief and exhaustion mingling. For the first time the mask did not move during the night. Days passed. It remained in the corner, inert, almost benign. He dared to hope. But deep down, he knew the mask was only patient, waiting. And even if it rested now, it would move again when least expected, for the debt it carried was ancient and relentless. Months later, a new buyer came to his market stall, asking about rare artifacts. Kojo, still wary, hesitated. Yet as the mask rested behind him, he realized with a sinking heart that he could never truly part with it. The mask had chosen him, and perhaps in some terrible way, he had chosen it too. When night fell, and the city quieted, the mask's hollow eyes reflected the moonlight. And though it had not moved for months, Kojo swore he could hear the faintest scraping like nails against stone, somewhere in the darkness. Waiting, always waiting, patient as death itself. Kojo tried to return to a normal life, but normalcy had been stolen. Even in daylight, shadows clung to corners, long and unnatural. The mask sat in the corner of his apartment, innocuous and still, but he could feel it. Each morning, its hollow eyes seemed sharper, more calculating. He could almost hear a faint whisper if he listened too closely. One evening, a neighbor knocked. She was young, bright-eyed, and friendly, carrying a basket of fruit. "I thought you might like some," she said with a smile. Kojo forced a polite grin, hiding the tremor in his hands. As she left, he noticed something strange. The mask, for the first time, seemed to tilt toward her as if observing, appraising. A chill crawled up his spine. That night, Kojo woke to a scraping sound more insistent than ever. The mask had moved, this time closer to the bed than ever before, almost daring him to rise. Heart racing, he reached out to touch it, and its surface felt unervingly warm, almost alive. Whispers wrapped around his ears. "He saw me, he will pay." Kojo realized the mask's anger was not at him alone. It was protecting some unfinished vendetta, some secret buried in blood and shadows. Sleep became impossible. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the mask in every reflection. Mirrors, windows, even puddles on the street. It was everywhere, omnipresent. He stopped leaving his apartment, stopped answering calls. Friends came and left, worried. His family called, voices edged with concern. But no one could see what he saw. The mask existed in a plane that only he occupied. One night, desperate, he decided to speak to it directly. "What do you want from me?" he shouted into the darkened room. The mask remained still, then slowly, impossibly, the mouth opened. A voice rasped, brittle as dry leaves. "Return what was stolen." "What was stolen?" Kojo asked, voice trembling. "Life, honor, debt." The room grew colder. Shadows rose like smoke along the walls. The mask's eyes glowed red for a heartbeat, then faded. Kojo felt a pull in his chest, as if invisible hands gripped him tight, squeezing warning. Driven to uncover its origin, Kojo dove into research he had once thought impossible. He discovered references to a secret Ghanaian clan that used masks to contain vengeful spirits of ancestors betrayed in life. The mask's previous owners had ignored the rites, stolen from the dead, and paid with horror. One story told of a merchant who went insane after the mask whispered secrets no living person could bear, while another vanished entirely, leaving behind only a trail of blood in the apartment. Kojo realized the mask had chosen him because of a connection he did not yet understand. A fragment of his own family's history seemed entangled with it. Late one night, as he pored over ancient manuscripts, a photo fell from a book. An ancestor of his, face twisted in terror, standing beside the mask. The resemblance was uncanny. His blood ran cold. The mask was not just a relic. It was a piece of his own past, a dark reflection of a sin long buried. Days blurred into nights. Kojo barely ate, barely slept. He could feel the mask's presence pressing on his mind, shaping his thoughts. Shadows became living creatures, whispering, laughing, taunting him. One night, he awoke to find the mask gone again. Panic surged. He searched the apartment, then the hallway, then outside. There, across the street, he saw it resting on a fire hydrant, its hollow eyes scanning the road as if waiting for him to notice. He tried to flee the city, but each step felt wrong, unnatural. Every cab he called would suddenly swerve, forcing him to abandon the ride. Each bus seemed to take him back toward the apartment, toward the mask. It was a trap. The mask had woven his world into its own design. Escape was impossible. Kojo's obsession grew. He began recording the mask, taking photographs, documenting every move. In the footage, he could see subtle changes. A tilt of the head, a shift in expression, a flash of movement that seemed impossible for wood. He noticed shadows in the corners of the frames that were not there in the room. Then came the night the mask moved while the camera was recording. He watched the playback in horror. The mask had shifted, staring directly into the lens, and a voice hissed from the speakers. "You cannot hide." Kojo dropped the camera, shattering it on the floor. He realized he was not merely being watched. The mask could see, could act, could manipulate reality itself. Desperate, he returned to the healer. The old man's face was grave when he saw the mask. "It grows stronger," he said. "It knows fear. It feeds on it. You cannot bargain with it forever." "What do I do?" Kojo pleaded. "Bind it," the healer said. "Perform the ancient rite, sacrifice a part of yourself. Only then can the mask rest." The ritual was grueling. Kojo spent days preparing, tracing symbols, chanting, offering blood and tokens of devotion. The mask resisted, shifting violently during the ceremony, hissing, whispering threats that made his blood run cold. The air burned and the walls shook. He felt invisible claws clawing at his skin, his mind fraying. Yet he persisted. When the ritual ended, the mask fell still. For hours, Kojo could not move, not trusting his own senses. The mask sat quietly, almost submissive. But the old man's warning echoed in his ears. "It is patient, always patient. It waits for the moment you falter." Weeks passed. Kojo tried to resume life, but his reflection seemed wrong. Shadows lingered longer than they should. At night, he could hear whispers, soft and knowing, as if the mask were still near. He tried to sell it, bury it, lock it away. Nothing worked. The mask was inexorably tied to him, as though it had claimed him entirely. Then one night, Kojo awoke to a sound he had never heard before. A soft, weeping voice, not from the mask, but around it. The mask had begun moving in ways impossible to explain, floating slightly above the floor, turning, angling its hollow eyes toward him. And then he saw them, shapes forming in the shadows, faces of those who had owned it before, twisted, accusing, trapped between this world and the next. It was then he realized the ultimate truth. The mask did not merely haunt him. It bound him into a cycle, feeding off fear and obsession, creating new souls for its collection. His destiny was no longer his own. Resistance was meaningless. The mask's curse was eternal, stretching back centuries, forward into infinity. Kojo understood in that terrible moment that the mask's whispers were not threats. They were promises. And as he gazed into the hollow ancient eyes, he saw his own face reflected there, pale, terrified, merging with the darkness. The mask tilted, smiled, and in that instant he was no longer alone. The city slept. The moon hung low over Accra. And somewhere in the quiet streets, a mask moved on its own, searching for the next soul brave, or foolish, enough to hold it. The mask arrived quietly, wrapped in old cloth, a dark shape that seemed heavier than it should be. Kojo had purchased it from the market, unaware of the centuries of blood and wrath contained in its carved hollow eyes. He brought it home with the casual excitement of a collector, thinking only of the beauty of its craftsmanship. The vendor had warned him in a whisper, "It does not like to be left alone," but he laughed it off. That night, the mask sat on his table, staring. Its hollow eyes reflected the lamplight, endless voids that made him shiver. Kojo tried to sleep, but a scraping sound awakened him. The mask was no longer on the table. It had moved, angled slightly toward his bed, its stare sharp and accusatory. He rubbed his eyes, convinced he was dreaming. But when he blinked, it remained, and his heart began to hammer in fear he could not deny. The next night, the mask shifted again, closer to his bed. He tried locking it away, burying it, even wrapping it in cloth, but the next morning it would be back on the table, perfectly positioned, eyes gleaming as though smug at his impotence. Fear gripped him in a slow, unrelenting coil. Kojo's research into the mask consumed him. He learned it was a vessel for the wrath of an ancestor, a member of a secret Ghanaian clan, bound by ancient rites to punish the living when desecrated. Every previous owner had met tragedy, madness, or disappearance. The last had left a note. "It moves when you sleep." Kojo realized the mask's movements were not random. It observed, it judged, it hunted. As nights passed, sleep became impossible. Shadows twisted in corners, taking on shapes that were almost human. The scraping intensified. Whispering voices began, low and coaxing, promises of power, warnings of doom. Kojo's life became a nightmare. His days a blur of dread and obsession. One night, desperate, he spoke to the mask directly. "What do you want?" he demanded. The room froze. The mask tilted, and for the first time, its carved mouth moved, rasping words that seemed to crawl across the room. "You hold what is mine. Return me or join me." Kojo's skin crawled. The air felt thick, heavy, pressing in. He sought a healer, an old man rumored to communicate with spirits. The healer examined the mask with fear and reverence. "You cannot destroy it," he said. "You must appease it, bind it as it was bound before, or it will consume you." Kojo attempted the ritual the healer prescribed. For hours he chanted, sprinkled herbs, and offered tokens of respect. The mask shook, groaned, the room temperature dropping until his breath fogged before him. "Enough," it whispered. The voice was different now, less threatening, more commanding. The mask seemed to recognize him. Relief was temporary. Days later, a neighbor, unsuspecting, caught the mask's attention. It tilted toward her, almost alive, and Kojo realized its wrath was not merely toward him. It was protecting a vendetta spanning generations. Sleep returned only partially. Each night, whispers grew louder, shadows lingered longer. The mask's movements were subtle now. On shelves, across floors, sometimes behind doors he had locked. Its things, and once the mask's mouth moved while he watched, whispering, "You cannot hide." The mask's influence expanded beyond his apartment, manipulating streets, cabs, even buses, pulling him inexorably toward it. The healer warned him again. "It grows stronger. You cannot bargain forever. Bind it, sacrifice part of yourself." Kojo prepared the ritual. It was grueling, violent, excruciating. The mask resisted, levitating slightly, hissing, shadows in the corners forming faces of previous victims, silent witnesses trapped in its curse. When the ritual ended, the mask fell still. Kojo hoped for relief, but the healer's words haunted him. "It is patient, always patient, waiting for the moment you falter." Weeks passed. Shadows lingered longer, reflections twisted, whispers returned. Every night, the mask moved slightly, imperceptibly, a subtle reminder of its eternal vigilance. Then the mask began a new game. Kojo awoke to a sound he had never heard. A soft, weeping voice, seemingly coming from the mask. It floated above the floor, moving with impossible grace, and behind it, ghostly forms of previous owners appeared, twisted, accusing, trapped between worlds. The mask had grown in power, not merely haunting him but collecting souls, weaving a cycle of fear and death. Kojo realized the ultimate truth. The mask did not merely haunt, it ensnared, feeding on obsession, fear, and blood. Resistance was futile. It was patient, eternal, and cunning. Its whispers were not threats, they were promises. The final horror dawned in his mind. He was not just its victim. He had become part of its curse, another shadow trapped to warn or lure the next. The city slept unaware. The moon hung low over Accra. And somewhere in the quiet streets, a mask moved on its own, searching for the next soul brave, or foolish enough to claim it. The market was closing, the late afternoon sun folding behind the rooftops of Accra, painting the streets in gold and shadow. Among the stalls of fabrics and carved wood, one item seemed out of place. A mask lacquered black, its hollow eyes staring with a depth that unsettled even the most seasoned collectors. Kojo, young and eager, ran his fingers over the smooth surface. The air around it seemed colder. The vendor leaned close, his voice low. "This mask, it does not like to be left alone. Take it, and you will see it move." Kojo laughed nervously. Legends were for children. Yet when he held it in his hands, a strange weight pressed on his chest, a heartbeat that did not belong to him. He bought it and carried it home, unaware that the mask had already begun marking him as its own. That night, it sat on his table, its hollow eyes reflecting the lamplight. Kojo could not shake the sensation of being watched. Shadows stretched across the walls, twisting into faces that did not belong. When he finally slept, he dreamed of darkness crawling across his chest, of hands reaching from nowhere to grip him. A faint scraping woke him. His heart leapt. The mask was no longer on the table. It lay on the floor, angled toward his bed, eyes glinting as if daring him to move. He rubbed his eyes, convinced it was a hallucination. But the cold creeping up his spine told him otherwise. Night after night, the mask moved. Closer to the bed, to the doorway, sometimes at the foot of the stairs. Kojo tried to lock it away, wrap it in cloth, even bury it. But the next morning it always returned to the table, silent, immovable, eternal. The whispers began softly at first, unintelligible, almost hypnotic. "Return, return." Then they sharpened, clearer, in the local Twi language, promises of power, warnings of death. Kojo's research consumed him. The mask belonged to a secret Ghanaian clan, created to contain a vengeful ancestor spirit. Every previous owner had met tragedy or vanished. The last note he found read, "It moves when you sleep." He realized with dawning horror that the mask watched him constantly, even when he closed his eyes. One night, desperation overcame fear. He leaned toward it and demanded, "What do you want?" The mask tilted. Its mouth, carved and frozen for centuries, moved. A slow, rasping voice filled the room. "You hold what is mine. Return me or join me." The air grew thick. Invisible hands seemed to press against his chest. Shadows twisted around the walls, forming shapes, faces, impossible angles. Kojo's knees buckled. He sought a healer, an old man who communicated with spirits. The healer examined the mask, fear in his eyes. "You cannot destroy it. You must appease it, bind it as it was bound before, or it will consume you." Kojo followed the ritual. He chanted, sprinkled herbs, offered tokens of respect. The mask trembled, shaking, its presence heavy, alive. The room grew cold, his breath fogging before him. When it finished, the mask's hollow eyes glowed, recognizing him. Relief was fleeting. Shadows lingered longer, whispers returned. Even in daylight, Kojo felt watched. The mask seemed to tilt slightly, subtle movements catching the corner of his eyes. Once, a neighbor approached, unsuspecting, and the mask appeared to focus on her. The air thickened. Kojo realized it protected a vendetta spanning generations. He researched further and discovered the mask's tie to his lineage. An ancestor in an old photograph mirrored the same terror he felt now. The mask had chosen him. Its whispers shaped reality around him. Filming it provided no solace. Shadows appeared in recordings. Ghostly faces lingered behind the mask, impossible movements and whispering voices emerging from the speakers. "You cannot hide." It reached beyond his apartment, manipulating streets, vehicles, drawing him back toward it. The healer warned again. "It grows stronger. You cannot bargain forever. Bind it, sacrifice a part of yourself." Kojo performed the grueling ritual. Hours stretched into a blur of chanting, herbs, tokens of blood and devotion. The mask resisted violently, levitating, hissing, shadows forming accusing faces of previous victims. The air burned, walls shook, and invisible claws scraped his skin. He persisted, chanting louder, until finally the mask stilled, inert. Weeks passed. Shadows lingered longer than they should. Reflections twisted. Whispers returned. At night, the mask moved slightly, a subtle reminder of its eternal vigilance. Kojo realized he was now bound, an unwilling part of the mask's cycle. Then the mask began a new game. It moved with impossible grace, floating slightly above the floor. Soft, weeping voices emanated from it. Behind it, ghostly shapes of previous owners appeared, accusing, trapped between worlds. The mask was no longer just haunting. It collected souls, weaving a cycle of fear and death. Kojo understood the ultimate truth. He was not merely haunted. He was ensnared, feeding the mask's insatiable appetite for fear and obsession. Resistance was meaningless. The whispers were promises, not threats. He was part of its eternal collection, another shadow trapped to warn or lure the next. The city slept. The moon hung low over Accra. Somewhere in the quiet streets, a mask moved on its own, searching for the next soul brave, or foolish enough to claim it. Its hollow eyes glinted, patient, eternal, waiting as it had for centuries. Kojo's apartment remained silent. For now. But in the darkness, shadows twisted, whispers circled, and the mask's cold, hollow gaze marked him as its own. And as he lay awake, he knew the truth. The mask would never stop. It would never leave. It had chosen him, and in some terrible, inescapable way, he had chosen it too. The mask was patient, waiting, always waiting. For more cursed stories that will keep you awake at night, subscribe now. Turn on notifications, if you dare. Follow for the next terrifying tale you won't forget.